Welcome back. Right now, we are joined virtually by Ali Patidi. She's a podcast host, digital content creator, native of the entertainment industry, and so much more. She's here with us from Los Angeles. How are you today, Ali? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you come on. Many things to talk about, but first, I want to focus on your podcast. You're talking about really big things, having deep conversations. It's making a huge difference. So, tell me a little bit more about how the podcast originally came to be.
Yeah, so like I said before, I have had a background in entertainment for a long time. My family's involved in the entertainment industry. I always knew I wanted to be a part of it, but I never knew which lane was for me. And then the last 2 years have honestly been some of the hardest years of my life. I have gone through physical health issues, mental health issues that I've never experienced before. And I just felt like I wanted to do something with those stories. I had a really impactful call with a mentor of mine, and she was like, "Have you ever thought of doing a podcast?" And I was like, honestly, no, I never thought of that. I never thought that that was the lane I wanted to take. I never thought interviewing people was something that I'd be good at. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit down and try, tape my first episode. And from then on, I had like a million ideas. I felt so safe to share information about myself. My guests have been so amazing and so open to sharing their own personal stories. And it's just created such a great space for people to share. And it's been like therapy for me.
You have a very large platform and an impressive following. Did you ever feel apprehensive about sharing such personal things out in the open on social media where the public isn't always kind? You mentioned that you've always felt very safe, but before you started, before you made that choice to open up, especially about mental health struggles, were you worried about that?
Definitely. I would say since I was younger, on Instagram, my family has always been like, why do you post these things? Like, why are you so open about your life on Instagram? Like, no one understood that. So, Instagram has always been like a diary for me where I'll just like air it out. And it's never been something I've been afraid to do. But once I started the podcast, I was definitely apprehensive to share a lot of stories. And to be honest, there's a lot of stories I haven't shared yet. I haven't figured out how I want to share them. I still talk to my dad every day. I'm like, can I talk about this on the podcast? And he's like, no, not yet. Like, give it some time. It's definitely hard to share such personal things. And I would say when I tape an episode, it all comes out and I'll be super honest. And then when we go to the edit phase, that's when I'm like, okay, not ready to share that. Let's take this out for now. And then, we put it on the list of things that we want to talk about, but we're just not ready yet. So it comes and goes with being afraid to share things and all of that.
And while there have been, as you mentioned, things that you haven't shared, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea because you have shared a lot. And I think it's really helped connect you to people that need help, that maybe struggle talking about it or struggle knowing how to open up about mental health struggles. But when you talk about the podcast and the conversations you have had, how have those impacted you and also the people who listen in? You've talked about things like toxic friendships, being a survivor, OCD. These are some big, heavy conversations. How has that gone and what type of feedback have you gotten?
The feedback has been amazing. I'm really grateful to always hear from people that there's a lot of people I don't know. And then there's people that I knew when I was in third grade. Like a teacher of mine reached out to me and said something about an episode that I taped. And that has made me feel so good and empowered. And it's only made me want to share more. I feel like the feedback in general has been really motivating. And for me, episodes that I tape where I learn something from a guest, I've just learned so much about myself. I always hear what my listeners are saying and try to relate to them while also giving them a space to just share their stories. And it's really interesting because I've shared stuff like in my episode with Haley Jacobson, I did come out as a survivor. I've never said that in my life. I've never told anybody that I'm a survivor. I've never referred to myself that way. And in that moment, I just felt safe to say it and it just came out. And she ended up almost like giving me therapy and being like, there's no right way to be a survivor. There's no right way to come out and share who you are, what your experiences are. Like, it's yours to tell and it's yours to go through. And I am so grateful because there's been so many more experiences like that too. Having my guests, like, I've learned so much about myself, and it's actually helped me heal from a lot of trauma that I've been through.
You know, you've been so open, but also I think there's something about you that makes people feel comfortable. But as a podcast host, how do you help people feel at ease, and how do you get them to open up and have these very personal conversations that are making a big difference?
Yeah. So the process starts with me finding the guests that I want on, and then I typically do my own research of knowing what I want them to share. I never really tell them, can you please talk about the fact that you have OCD? Or I'll never just come out and tell someone, like, I want you to share this, but I'll give them information on what the podcast is trying to do, what our mission is. And then I will ask them, like, their interest in sharing certain things. And that's more like the back end stuff. And then when we're taping, I tape in my apartment. It was really important for me to create a really cozy, warm environment. So when you're taping an episode on my podcast, you're coming to my apartment, my space, where I make it feel really cozy, a safe place to open up. My team is like a female team. We're all really hardworking women. And I just think I've created a space that is physically really comfortable and warm for people, and it's allowed people to want to share their stories. And I think that they also watch episodes before coming on, and they see what we're trying to do, and they're excited to do it too.
And what can you tell us about upcoming episodes and topics? And are there also other things that you're hoping to discuss in the future that maybe aren't specifically done or planned yet? Are there certain topics of conversation that you're very anxious to get to?
Yeah, so coming up, we're going to have a few episodes that are going to dive a little bit deeper into my own experiences with panic disorder, depression. I've talked about it a lot, but I haven't really gotten into the details of what it looks like for me, how it manifests, and how I'm doing now. I haven't really updated anyone on where I'm currently at. So that's coming up in the coming weeks. We have a really special guest. We're actually taking our first trip to go tape an episode in Houston. So that will be really exciting. We're going to be traveling to get a super special guest that we wanted to get an in-person interview with. So I'm not going to share any more yet, but that is going to be really exciting. We also have our next mini series planned. It's going to be a month-long series talking about divorce and split households. And I think we're going to try to do one other mini series on relationships and dating. That's like looking out all the way until the end of the season, which we're thinking will be around Thanksgiving. And I'm just excited to share more details of, I've made really big statements and I've opened up about a lot of things, but I also just want to share what those things look like for me on a daily basis, and more details about those things and what happened. And when I'm ready, I will share those things.
And Allie, what is your ultimate goal with this podcast? What do you think is kind of your overarching mission, that one thing that keeps you going and wants you to continue and that you hope to achieve through this?
I think selfishly for me, like, sharing is healing. When I'm sharing my stories, I'm healing as well. And I think that goes for the people I bring on the podcast as well. So I hope to just continue doing that and making an impact on myself and hopefully others, and just continuing to create a space for people to listen and relate and laugh and feel like they can cry if they need to. Any emotions you want to feel, you're safe to feel them. I think long term, it would be really awesome if I could turn it into some sort of a talk show, or, a bigger space that can be even more powerful than it already is. And yeah, I'm kind of just right now, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, and I can't wait to see where it takes me. And I almost can't predict where it will.
Well, you are making a big difference in these very important conversations that you're having on your podcast, on social media. How can we make sure to tune into your podcast? Where can we find it? And how can we follow you on social media and such?
Yeah, you can follow me on socials. My Instagram and TikTok is just my first name and last name, Ali Patiti. To find the podcast, it's on every single streaming platform where you would ever find a podcast, Spotify, Apple Music, all of that. It's also on YouTube. We do video versions as well. I love those. So if you are a visual listener, you are more than welcome to tune into my YouTube channel. It's just Trying to Figure It Out with Ali Patiti. The podcast is called Trying to Figure It Out. I don't even know if I said that, but it is called Trying to Figure It Out, and it's available pretty much everywhere you could want to find it.
Well, thank you so much, Ali Patiti, for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I very much admire how you are opening up about mental health struggles and so much more, making a big difference, not only in the podcast space, but also on social media and to people everywhere who really are connecting through the stories that you're sharing there. The podcast, once again, is called Trying to Figure It Out. And thanks again to Ali for joining us today. We'll be back with more right after this.